Bev, thank you, and a very good evening to you. The top story tonight at 6. Reform UK's Deputy Leader Richard Tice has slammed Labour, claiming they failed to take immigration seriously and dismiss working-class voters. It comes after a letter seen by GBNews reveals Sir Keir Starmer told his ministers to admit that his party ignored working people's concerns about immigration. The Prime Minister says politicians have also become too scared to acknowledge that some migrants are genuine refugees, but some aren't. He also warns Labour must stop patronising voters and counter the rise of Reform UK's policies. He also pledges to stand up for ordinary people who feel shut out and ignored by elites. Also in politics tonight, Labour MP Andrew Gwynn, who was sacked over what were described as vile WhatsApp messages, is now under investigation by Parliament's standards watchdog. He was dismissed as a health minister earlier this month after sending sexist, anti-Semitic and ageist messages in a group chat with other Labour MPs. Well, the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards is probing whether his actions caused significant damage to the reputation of MPs and the House of Commons as a whole. Pope Francis is being treated for double pneumonia but remains stable, according to his doctor in the Vatican. Dr. Sergio Alfieri confirmed the pontiff is not in danger of death, but stressed his recovery is ongoing. The hospital where he is staying is not releasing images of the Pope, though, during his treatment, due to respect for his privacy. The Pope will remain in hospital at least through the next week, with his condition changing daily. His doctor reassured the public, stating Pope Francis is not out of danger, but not in immediate risk either. Israel has accused Hamas of violating the ceasefire after forensic tests showed a body returned from Gaza was not that of hostage Shiri Bibas. Her 2 young sons were identified among the remains, though, along with an 84-year-old man. The Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, says Hamas put the body of a Gazan woman in a coffin instead and has now vowed to make the terror group pay the full price. Israel is now demanding the return of Shiri Bibas, whether she is alive or dead. Well, Hamas says the mix-up may have been caused by an Israeli airstrike, and earlier journalist Amir Oren gave us his thoughts.
You have two possible hypotheses. One is that the chaos in Gaza is such that the minor organization, or actually crime family, who originally abducted the Bibas family and then had to give them over to Hamas, misplaced the body, or perhaps Hamas later misplaced the body. The other possibility is that Shiri Bibas was abused, molested, or worse.
The BBC has pulled a Gaza documentary from iPlayer after discovering its 13-year-old narrator is the son of a Hamas official. The broadcaster says it wasn't informed of the family connection before airing the programme and is now conducting further due diligence. It comes after Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy and high-profile media figures urged the BBC to investigate how the film was made. The programme was removed today, with the BBC saying it won't return while that review takes place. Also tonight, 3 men convicted in connection with a vile grooming gang in West Yorkshire will have their sentences reviewed by the Court of Appeal after an MP called them pathetically short. 47-year-old Ibra Hussain and brothers Imtaz and Fayaz Ahmed, aged 62 and 45, were sentenced last month to prison terms ranging from 6.5 years to 9 years. The case involved the abuse of 2 teenage girls in the 1990s. And following public outcry, including local MPs, the Solicitor General has referred their sentences to the Court of Appeal for review. And finally, some tech news for you. Apple is taking the unprecedented step of removing its strongest data security feature from the UK devices after the government demanded access to user data. The change means iCloud storage will no longer be encrypted, making personal files accessible to both Apple and law enforcement with a warrant. Apple, though, says it's gravely disappointed and warns creating a backdoor for governments could be exploited by bad actors. Privacy campaigners have also called it an unprecedented attack, while US politicians warn it could threaten intelligence sharing with the UK. That's the news on GB News, a full roundup of all the top stories at 7 o'clock. Now, though, straight back to Bev.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Very good evening. Welcome to News & Co with me, Bev Turner. Tonight, while Michelle is off for half-term, now joining me until 7 o'clock, Chairman of Great British PAC, Ben Habib, and journalist and former press secretary to Paddy Ashdown, Joe Phillips. Evening, both of you. Now, don't forget you can get in touch at home this evening, gbnews.com/your say. GB News has seen a private letter that Sir Keir Starmer has reportedly sent to his cabinet saying that Labour must stop looking down on people who are worried about immigration. Does this mean the PM is taking the fight to reform, and can he appeal to those voters? Let's just have a look at this letter, guys, and the bits that we've seen from it. He says ministers had to stop looking down on people, Ben, who are worried about immigration, which is a message that he needs to get out to the public to have any chance whatsoever of winning back people from reform who are at the moment ahead on that particular debate.
Yeah.
It's safe to say.
I mean, I think the salient issue for politics today right across Western Europe, the United Kingdom and the United States is immigration. You know, as Suella Braverman said a couple of years ago, many people have reiterated since then, including obviously myself and most recently JD. I think you have to say Vance is the right way to pronounce it.
As opposed to Vance.
As opposed to Vance, yeah. Oh, I just think JD Vance, but anyway. And JD Vance said it was the seminal issue that, you know, we need to deal with. So immigration is right up there. And, you know, I think what leaders of Western civilization need to recognise is that any form of immigration, and this is going to make people's eyebrows rise, including Joe's, no doubt, but any form of immigration is an admission that you can't deal with issues in your own country on your own. When you take foreign people into your country, you should only do it if there's a need for your country to have those foreigners. In other words, you can't fill the need from within. And what we've done is there's been some ideological hijacking of the British governing class over the last 30 or 40 years in particular, where they've seen the taking on of vast quantities of foreign people into our country and then wrapping them in a protected blanket and allowing multicultural silos to exist, where there's division, frankly, within our society, as some kind of liberal, diverse advantage. And what we've done in the process is undermine our workforce, put undue burden on our public services, break the settled culture that the United Kingdom used to have, and create division right across society. And by the way, that doesn't make sense, what I've just said, division across society, because society requires a settled, integrated culture, and we don't have one. We've broken our society.
Joe, if Keir Starmer really thinks this, he talks in this letter about this example of a woman that he met in Oldham in Lancashire. He says she only felt able to raise concerns about young migrant men from Europe committing antisocial behaviour by convincing him first that she was not racist. He said, I think about a woman I met in Oldham who was worried about antisocial behaviour, and she had to start by saying, I'm not racist, but...
Yes.
If he thinks this, why doesn't he say it publicly? Why are we having to see it in a leaked letter?
I think these are conversations that are going on right around the world with the liberal, centre-left, whatever you want to call them. You know, whether it's the Democrats in America who lost absolutely comprehensively, whether it's the rise of the far right, and I hate those labels, by the way, but, you know, for shorthand purposes across Europe. And I think it's sent the shockwaves through that sort of centre ground, if you like, of which the British Labour Party is part. And I think it is a recognition that that sense of we know best, we have ignored the genuine concerns of people. So, you know, it's fine, but you can't keep... You know, personally, I don't think... I know Ben would disagree because he always bangs on about it, but I don't think immigration is #1 priority. I think the economy is the #1 priority.
They go hand in hand,
Well,
though,
they may
Joe.
well do. But if you said to somebody, what is the biggest thing, I bet most people are worried about how they're going to pay the bill.
There are 7.2 million people on universal credit, and they wouldn't be there if it wasn't for unbridled, virtually unskilled
on an island.
immigration.
It is inevitable on an island that you are going to have people from different countries and different parts of the world coming. You're also going to see more people leaving their homelands because of climate change, which I know you also have a bee in your bonnet about.
The unbridled form of legal and illegal migration taking place across Western civilization has nothing to do with climate change. It has everything to do with an ideological experiment at the expense of nation-states in the pursuit of the false goal of some kind of liberal utopia that will come about for the globe through governance for the globe.
I think it is not in any sort of malevolent sense. I think it is people wanting to be tolerant and welcoming.
It is malevolent. It is malevolent to the British people, because when you take in such vast numbers of people from different cultures, you undermine our ability to work and earn a fair wage for that work in the United Kingdom, and you undermine our culture. I just want to say one other thing. Starmer is so hypocritical. On the day that he's advocating that his colleagues should be concerned about immigration, he's busy signing up to more freedom of movement with the European Union.
Well, that's what I was going to say. We've got a letter here where he's telling his cabinet, don't talk down to people on this, empathise with them. It's OK to say that some people shouldn't be here. But at the same time, his actions are not reflected.
They're not consistent.
Well, it feels a little shallow.
I think there are 2 points here. One of the things that he says in this letter, if this is indeed is true, he says pure economic migration was confused with genuine concern for those fleeing persecution. We ended up treating all immigration as untrammelled good. Now, I think that's important. I mean, I think there are several things to unpack here, Bev. One is the fact that actually it is quite right that other parties are taking reform seriously. They need to be. You know, and it's no good pretending that if you ignore them, they will disappear any more than the Greens will, or the Liberal Democrats, actually. And we may talk about farming later. And, you know, there are an awful lot of new Labour MPs who are suddenly facing the wrath of farmers and the reality of life in the rural parts of Britain. But I don't think he's being hypocritical. And I think, you know, as we move on to this week, which has seen utter turmoil, thanks to those puppets of Putin in the White House, we actually...
Which we will also be banging on about in a little while.
But we need now to reset our relationship with Europe, which doesn't mean necessarily rejoining or anything like that. But Europe is where our future lies, because it sure as hell doesn't lie with the Americans.
Let me take
Oh, my goodness. I couldn't disagree more. You look across Europe...
That's why they've got us on, Ben.
One of the reasons we've got this unbridled immigration, one of the reasons we're suffering with this problem is because Europe has literally taken down its borders in the pursuit of its another ideological aim for the doing away of nation-states and a federal Europe. If they had borders between France, Italy, Germany, the Netherlands, and all other EU member countries instead of this stupid Schengen zone, which is daft as brushes, you'd actually have the opportunity to stop illegal migrants at every single juncture.
The burden on trade and travel and
so you just give up the security of the continent in the pursuit of some cheaper goods? Well, it makes no sense. And there's nothing good worth buying coming out of Germany or France at the moment, as far as I'm concerned.
Bending over backwards to try and wiggle around the tariffs that Trump may impose.
Let me just bring you to one other phrase from this letter that I thought was quite chilling. I know, because this is a bit of an exclusive for us this afternoon. Starmer says, what started with good faith paternalism has too readily become looking down on people. I don't want a government to be paternal.
No, I want them to respond to
I'm not a child.
Absolutely right.
Don't behave like you are my father.
But that's what he's saying.
But he says it started with good faith paternalism. Like, that is a good thing to be paternal to your population. No, don't treat me like a child. Don't be my parent.
Absolutely right.
I completely agree with you. But, you know, there are surveys that have been done in recent weeks that show young people, they actually don't think elections are worth bothering with. They want a strong leader, even if that means a dictator or a military leader.
Yes, you're right. I did see the results.
You know, there are...
But shouldn't he then be saying to these young people, you don't want that. You don't want us to be... You don't want to be a dictatorship. You don't want me to be your state's father. You don't want the state to take responsibility for everything you do in life. Be an individual, look after yourself, take some responsibility.
But I think politics has changed hugely, and I think Ben and I would probably agree on this, in the last 25 years, particularly.
For the worse?
Well, whether it's for the worse or not, it has changed across the world. You know, we are more linked geopolitically than we ever were. There are...
But we shouldn't be. That's the point.
Isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
But there are other things, you know, whether it's, you know, war, whether it's famine, whether it's COVID, whatever it is, there are other things going on that mean we have got to do, and have always had to do, alliances with people who may not necessarily be our thing. But I do think it is right that the Labour Party address this issue, because there's no point in the Labour Party or the Liberal Democrats or anybody else sitting there wringing their hands. And what we see is Kemi Badenoch desperately chasing reform, trying to out-reform and suck up to Trump, ignoring the One Nation Tories, who you could say were slightly paternalistic.
If you have to tell your cabinet, don't talk down to people, you've got the wrong cabinet.
You've got the wrong cabinet, you've got the wrong form of governance, and as I know you know this, Bev, because you've been on this subject absolutely spot on throughout lockdown and since, is that we've got a government that actually infantilises the population. They locked us up. They told us we couldn't make our own decisions. They forced us to have vaccines. They broke the economy. They broke the economy on the back of it. They broke the economy on the back of it. They want identity cards. They just removed Apple's ability to refuse GCHQ's interference in our private matters.
Literally at 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Banks are ever more intrusive into our private affairs. They want a central bank digital currency. This government is heading right towards complete control.
And we wonder why we've got a generation of young people who say, rule me harder, take away my freedoms, control me. We wonder why that's happened 5 years on. Right, anyway, we've got to take a very quick break. Don't go anywhere, because I am going to be grilling Ben Habib on how he feels about Reform changing their party structure this week. Surely he'll be delighted now, won't he? Don't go anywhere.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Newly released MI5 files reveal that Queen Elizabeth II was kept in the dark over the treachery of a senior courtier.
Yeah, for almost a decade. This is Sir Anthony Blunt, who played a double life, passing intelligence, the KGB, during World War II as a senior MI5 officer. But, remarkably, he was allowed to keep his position amid fears of a major scandal if the truth came out.
Well, now those files have been released by the National Archives, which includes the Queen's response to finding out a trusted member like Anthony Blunt was really a traitor.
Well, joining us now in the studio is GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker. Good to see you this morning, Cameron. This is astonishing.
Oh, absolutely. And this wasn't a little spy. This was Anthony Blunt was a full-blown spy. He passed to the Soviets the D-Day deception plans during the Second World War. He was working for MI5, but a double agent for the KGB as well.
The wrong plans.
He passed on the plans.
The wrong ones.
The wrong one in 1944. Yeah. Exactly. But he then got a job inside Buckingham Palace as one of the Queen's most trusted aides and courtiers, the surveyor of her art, essentially like kind of an art advisor for Her late Majesty. There was always suspicions about Anthony Blunt way back in the early 50s because he was part of this notorious Cambridge spy ring, a group of 5 boys recruited at Cambridge. 2 of these people fled to Moscow in 1951. Anthony stayed behind in London and subsequently got a job inside Buckingham Palace, and it wasn't until 1964 that he confessed to his treachery. The reason he confessed was because he was granted immunity.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to News & Co with me, Bev Turner, this evening. Ben Habib and Joe Phillips join me until 7 o'clock. I love our GB News viewers. You are so smart. I love the inbox, seeing the stuff that comes in, because you can't get anything past you lot at all. Here we go. Which one is it here? Mary says, when was the last time that Starmer went to Oldham? The timing of this letter has everything to do with JD Vance's speech yesterday and Starmer's trip to America next week. And just to clarify what that means, this American administration have been slaughtering Starmer publicly for his clamping down on free speech. They, you know, JD Vance stood up, didn't he, and said the other day, you know, the free speech is dead in the UK, effectively.
This is a government that's banning books in public libraries and schools.
Correct.
That was one of the best...
Oh, you mean the Republicans are?
Yes.
Well,
yes.
JD Vance's speech was one of the best speeches I've ever heard from a politician.
But they were banning books, just to be clear, encouraging younger children in issues of trans and sexual matters that they would deem as a Conservative government not appropriate for children.
Beverly, if you have a country or a government that starts banning books, that is the thin end of the wedge.
Well, Mein Kampf... Would you ban that?
Actually, no, I wouldn't.
Oh. Let me tell you.
It is banned.
I know it is.
Yeah.
I know.
David said at home, Starmer telling his cabinet to stop looking down on working class people must be a joke. When he was asked to say what he thought was a working class person, he couldn't even answer it. Exactly. And a lot of you saying that this, Bernard says, Starmer's purposely leaked this letter. It's supposed to fool us into making us think he's serious on immigration. Now, Christopher Hope would deny that. He was talking to Dawn Neeson this afternoon, and Christopher said this letter has been given to him in good faith, and he didn't think this was a deliberate leak in order to cast Starmer as some sort of anti-immigration reform lightist. Now, Nigel Farage has given up ownership of Reform UK, with the party saying that it wants to give more control to its members. It was founded in 2018 as a private limited company, and Chairman Zia Youssef says this change is an important step in professionalising the party. Ben Habib knows all about this more than anybody. Let's have a listen to party leader Nigel Farage making this announcement on GB News.
The company, the structure in which I own 2/3 of the shares, I no longer do. Now, this is a company limited by guarantee. Effectively, all of us in Reform own it. As of today, I don't own the company behind the party. And following on from that, we will now have a board with elected representation. And I think I can honestly say that we've turned it, in a relatively short period of time, into a fully functioning, democratic, modern political party.
Now, I can't remember ever having a conversation about a political party's management structure, Ben, and it doesn't sound like the most interesting of topics, but why does it matter?
6:30 on a Friday night? What else do you talk about?
So I think, explain to us, give us an idiot's guide as to why it matters.
OK, so why it's critical is that we live in a representative democracy where political parties effectively control the way our democracy functions, and therefore the structures of each political party become critically important, because if essentially until recently it was a choice between the Tories or Labour, then the lowest common denominator of the good that you can get from either of them turned on how they manage their own affairs. And one of the problems with the Tory party, for example, is that in the 1950s they had 2.8 million members, and it was the associations that were the strongest, and so the leadership had a very direct and clear contact with the people in the country whom they represented. They understood what the people wanted.
Right.
And slowly, over time, they lost their membership. CCHQ at the Tory party has become ever more overbearing. The local associations have lost their power, and the Tories have lost touch with the people. And that's what happened. And it's critical, if reform is going to be part of the political landscape going forward, as it appears to be, that it doesn't fall into the same trap.
So have they done what you wanted now with this change?
So they've made a very big step forward towards that, towards doing it. Nigel has, as he correctly pointed out, given up ownership of Reform UK Limited, which has been sold to another company that is limited by guarantee.
Right.
Up until that point, everything that Nigel said was correct and accurate. But what hasn't taken place is that the entity to which he sold his company has not yet been handed over to the membership.
But it could be.
It could be, but it hasn't been done yet. And then, equally importantly, the political party needs to move from Reform UK Limited, which is now owned by Reform 2025 Limited. The political party needs to move up to the parent company, and then that party needs to be governed by the party needs to be governed by the Electoral Commission and registered with the Electoral Commission. And all of that's vital, because if those latter two steps don't take place, then all you've got is Zaya and Nigel, who are the directors of Reform 2025 Limited, effectively still controlling the show. So you've got to do the next two steps. And Nigel's jumping the gun when he says we've democratised it. He hasn't. It hasn't taken place yet.
Is that not just an administrative thing, though?
Everything's administrative until it happens. The steps that they've taken so far, with the greatest of respect to Reform, I would have had my solicitors do within 48 hours of making the decision.
Well, you can go back and get involved with Reform now, Ben. If they've changed their structure in the way that you like, you know the public
if they do the next two steps, then actually I will be... whether or not I'm involved is irrelevant. I'll be totally relaxed if they do the next two steps and they genuinely democratise the party.
In a certain amount of time?
Well, they just got to do it, right?
Can you give them your solicitor? You could do it in 2 days.
I mean, I could get it done in a week. If Zaya wants to give me a call, I'll get it done in a week, yeah.
And would you go back and get involved with them?
Well, there is another issue, which is the constitution that they've drafted actually makes Nigel's position virtually unassailable. But I think we're, slowly by hook or by crook, we're dragging them down the democratisation path.
Now,
so it's vital. I think it's vital.
Joe, Ben Habib can make most things interesting, and he just about got away with it with that. He was slightly losing the room by the middle. I don't know about you.
I had a sort of sight sound of remote controls.
Yeah, well, hopefully not. Hopefully not, because...
But it is important.
Yeah. Do you think the average voter cares?
No.
They just like Reform for what they stand for.
They like Reform because of Nigel, and I think...
And their policies. And
their policies. And then the new kids on the block and all of that sort of stuff. But I do think it is terribly important that political parties, it is clear for people who are thinking of voting for them, getting involved, fundraising, delivering leaflets, whatever, know exactly where the money is coming from and where it is going to. So I'm quite curious about the entity that you mentioned. Now we're getting very obtuse here, aren't we?
Well, they also said it's a not-for-profit.
Yeah, that was an interesting declaration. I mean,
that sounds good. People will respond to that, won't they? But what's the suspicion is where is the money going? Who?
Yeah.
They've got deep pockets.
I mean, it was always slightly confusing to me, I have to say, and I've spent, most of my adult life in politics. Within the labyrinthian structures of the Liberal Democrats, I have to say, which is, sometimes...
Not a labyrinth. Most people would want to get stuck in.
Well, no, exactly.
Yeah. The illiberal, undemocratic lot.
I know, but I do think, there were sort of people, the general public, were going, how can they be standing for or putting people up for election when they are a private company? Now, anyone can stand for election. You don't have to be a member of a political party, as you know. Any one of us could stand. In fact, some of us have. But I do think it's important, and I think it's increasingly important that we know where money comes from, who are the donors, and what
we need transparency right across the board for the electorate to understand what the hell's going on.
There's no suggestion that Reform wouldn't be true.
No, I'm not suggesting. I'm not suggesting that for a second. But transparency is a critical component of understanding the political landscape, isn't it?
Yeah. I feel like it's their Reform to lose next time, Joe.
What, an election?
Reform, yeah.
I think we're too far out from an election.
4 years' time?
I think...
Could there be any... I think they're in a very strong position right now.
They're in a very strong position right now. Where I live in Kent, they've taken 3 seats in a very minor council by-election with a very low turnout, but they took 3 seats from Labour. They will continue to make gains locally. But I think what will happen is when people see, as often happens, on the ground, are those councillors any good?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how much you like the person who's the front man, it's actually, have they fixed the pothole or the sinkhole?
Talking as a true Lib Dem, who, as we know, might be a bit rubbish in the House of Commons, but make excellent constituency MPs.
Well, I don't know that they are rubbish in the House of Commons, actually.
Right, still to come. Coming up, linguistic shots have been fired between Trump and Musk at the Ukrainian President Zelensky. You do not want to miss what's been said today, but could all of this rhetoric bring the conflict to an end? Because that's what matters, isn't it? Don't go anywhere.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Storm Coral will be affecting eastern parts of the Mediterranean, bringing in a cold plume, so below average temperatures. These are set to affect Athens, parts of Santorini, so feeling cold here. But as we move our way further west, milder, yes, but some unsettled weather on the cards. Some rain affecting Nice, Barcelona, also parts of Portugal. But Madeira and Tenerife staying largely dry, and that remains the way into next week. Also the best of the temperatures, and temperatures improving across Santorini.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems in Leicester City Centre for Tigerway, the A594. It's been closed southbound at the scene of an accident between Regent Road and Welford Road on that short stretch. And in Shropshire, the A454, that's been closed at Hilton. So this is just to the east of Bridgenorth for accident investigation work. The M11 is partly blocked heading south of Cambridge, junction 10 at Duxford, where a lorry has broken down. On the Hertfordshire stretch of the M25, one lane's closed clockwise from junction 22 to 23 near St Albans, where a car's broken down. The roadworks on that stretch not helping, of course. North East London at Hackney, the A10 is closed on Kingsland Road near Dalston Junction as investigation work continues following an accident. And the M20 in Kent is down to a single lane heading towards the coast from junction 4 to 5. Leybourne to Aylesford after a coach and a lorry collided. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to News & Co with me, Bev Turner, this evening until 7 o'clock. Ben Habib is here, the chairman of Great British PAC and journalist and former current Liberal Democrat. Is that fair to say?
No, I'm not a member of any political party.
Oh, but former Liberal Democrat. That was where your heart used to lie.
That's who I worked for. Yes.
OK. Joe Phillips. Now, you at home will be getting in touch. Paul has said, Ben, are you going to pick up your dummy and get back to reform, or are you still not satisfied?
It's not about me. It's not about dummies. It's about saving the country.
You, Ben. It is about you.
It's not about me. It's about saving the country. And what we don't want is another false prophet, another false dawn, another set of false promises which aren't implemented. We need a strong, capable government which has joined-up thinking, which is accountable to its own membership, accountable to the people, and would deliver the promises it's made.
Leslie at home has said Farage got burnt with UKIP. He will not fully democratise the party. Has he learnt by his mistakes and therefore keep...
But I just don't buy that argument. How can you say... I bang the drum for British democracy. I believe the people know best and they should direct our government, and yet I will not trust my own members. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense to me. I'm sorry.
But he now is doing that, or they are now.
Well, if they do it, no, but the argument has been made repeatedly.
You know, with the best will in the world, this is like a very private argument.
We're doing it on the telly, Joe.
I know we are.
But Joe, we live in a representative democracy.
I know.
So
but
even
there are other parties that are available.
I know, and
apart
right
from
now reform is polling very high.
Yes, of course they are.
And there is a chance it will form a government. And I think that any responsible member of the public, in exercising their vote, would do their due diligence on parties.
Yes.
And I think this is an important part of that.
Absolutely, and I agree with you.
Right, let's look over to America, because no doubt what is happening there is going to have an impact here, particularly in the run-up to the next election. And, of course, it is just over 3 years since Vladimir Putin announced that he was going to be invading Ukraine. The death toll on each side has got into the hundreds of thousands, although it's very hard to get reliable numbers on that. Leaders around the world keep promising infinite financial support for Zelensky and Ukraine, but the arrival of Donald Trump, of course, has smashed through this global consensus. He's doubled down on his views in the past few hours, telling Fox News that Ukraine has no cards to play with. He says Zelensky has been at meetings for 3 years and he's got nothing done. And yesterday, Elon Musk said this.
People dead in trenches for what? And I'll tell you what for what. It's like for the biggest graft machine that I've ever seen in my life. That's for what. It's unreal. Like the amount of money that is being taken in graft and bribery is disgusting. And so what's actually happening is that those poor guys are getting sent into a meat grinder for money. That's what's actually going on.
The meat grinder for money, Joe. I don't know whether you could hear that there. They are changing the rhetoric around this conflict in the most extraordinary way.
It's disgusting.
It may be disgusting at some level.
No,
absolutely.
hang on a minute, Ben.
Yeah.
Let me...
I'll tell you what's more disgusting than the rhetoric. I'll tell you what's more disgusting than the rhetoric is hundreds of thousands of people needlessly dying. Let's just keep that in focus before we have this discussion.
Okay. Yeah. Hundreds of thousands of people needlessly dying. Putin didn't need to invade Ukraine.
Absolutely. Agreed with that.
He invaded Ukraine. Who is pulling the strings of these idiots in America? Is Musk pulling the strings of his useful idiot, Donald Trump, or is Putin pulling the strings of both of them? Because at the moment, you know, he's talking about Zelensky has got no cards to play. Well, Vladimir Putin is not a man in a hurry. He invaded Crimea in 2014 and the West did nothing. We went, oh, that's a bit naughty, and turned the other way. So then several years later, he goes back in. Now, he's been an international pariah since the invasion, quite rightly. Trump gets in, we're back on the phone, we're all mates, we're actually now singing off the Putin hymn book. And I think the thing that is so shocking, apart from the language, which I find deeply, deeply offensive. And I find this willy-waving of these men, and they are nearly all men.
It's not willy-waving. They're trying to...
Just be quiet.
Willy-wavers wage wars. They're trying to stop a war.
They're not. This is all about them playing Monopoly, Ben. This is about Trump wanting access to the mineral wealth
I totally disagree.
Ukraine and doing a deal with Putin that doesn't affect America at the moment, although Alaska is only 55 miles from America, and actually leaving Europe completely on its own. And I
totally disagree.
Well, obviously you do, as you keep saying. But the point is that Putin doesn't care. Trump has only got 4 years to do a deal. He's a man in a hurry. He looks like a strong man, but he's actually very weak.
Let's just analyse what's happened. Sorry.
Yes, sorry, Ben, go on.
Yeah. So let's just analyse what's happened. We've had 3 years of warfare, during which time very little ground has been made or lost by each side. After the initial push, Russia was pushed into the southeast of Ukraine, and they've stuck there. Every year, by my own estimate, $70 billion has been pumped into that war by America, and we've put in the thick end of $20 billion over the 3 years. A vast amount of money has gone, our British money, American money, our people's money has gone into that war with nothing to show for it. The likelihood of Zelensky pushing every Russian boot out of Ukraine is close to zero. And any propagation of this war is just going to cost more money and more lives. The West blamed the surge in inflation in 2022 on this conflict. The breadbasket of Europe was hijacked through this conflict. There can be no better outcome for Western interests now than to stop the money flow, stop the killing, and get Ukraine back into the global economic ecosystem.
And would that mean back into NATO? Or would that mean allowing them to join NATO? Do you trust Putin?
It's not a matter of trusting Putin.
Is,
and if if Europe is fearful of a resurgent, emboldened Putin and fear that he's going to attack Western Europe, what Europe should stop doing is hollowing out its military, which is another thing the Americans must be looking at in horror. The United Kingdom, a shadow of its former self. Germany, the next big spender on military equipment, actually nowhere on the pitch. The only country that seems to take defence seriously is Poland. All of the European nations need to wake up and get their military into order. That will be the biggest deterrent for Putin. And if you want peace, you've got to prepare for war, and we're not ready.
Go on, Joe.
Everybody wants peace, not least the people of Ukraine who have been through so much hell.
Did you get a sense that Biden wanted peace?
I think what we now know is that Biden was not really firing on all cylinders, and I think he was.
In that case, he clearly had people around him making decisions in other areas.
Yes.
So were there people around him that, and it was in their interest to keep this war going?
I don't think so. But I think all the time that Putin was in the box, as it were, excluded, sanctioned, and kept out of international affairs, and weakened to a certain extent. I think that they perhaps saw, and perhaps in Europe as well, we saw that that was enough. Now, there's an awful lot of Russian money, as you know, Ben, and you know far more about finance than I do, that could be used and could be released. It's being held in Belgium, I believe, at the moment. That could be used to help Ukraine. It could be used to bolster a European defence force. Donald Trump's not the first American president to say Europe needs to spend more on defence. JFK did back in the 1960s.
Not more. We've got to start defending ourselves. Yes. We have done exactly what we did after World War I, which is set aside our ability to defend ourselves. That is principally what emboldened Hitler to have a crack, because we weren't ready. And we're going to... That's the way you embolden people. There was a survey done 2 weeks ago in which nearly 40% of young British respondents said they weren't prepared to fight for this country. Again, because the nation-state's been hollowed out. The belief in this country's been hollowed out. Our ability to defend ourselves has been hollowed out.
These are the same young people that want a military strong leader. So those two things seem to be completely mutually exclusive.
Do you not, though,
we need a wake-up call.
More optimism, Joe, that the fighting will stop now?
The fighting will stop eventually. It's at what cost, Beverly? And I think that, it is naive to think that Putin will stop at Ukraine.
And can I just say, it's been nice to talk about this with some historical context from both of you, because the frustration with this is that it gets very much reduced to Putin is an evil psychopath, Zelensky is a hero without any kind of understanding of the backdrop. Yeah. You both clearly have an understanding of the backdrop. I got in trouble this week because I was called a Putin apologist, because it is frustrating in very quick-fire debates not to put this in some sort of context. But where we go next now is critical in this issue. And when you say at what cost, I think people who say that, well, we can finish this war at what cost, I always think, well, would you send your son or daughter out in a tin hat and a gun to go on the front line in Ukraine and have that fight?
I wouldn't want anybody's son or daughter to fight.
But whilst saying this war has to end at what cost, that is inherent, that is implicit.
But of course it is. But Beverly, when push comes to shove, I spent a lot of time in Bosnia in the mid-90s with Paddy Ashdown, and it is almost impossible to believe that people who were neighbours suddenly turn on each other, and people do take up arms and they do fight.
This is an unwinnable war. It will go on and on and on unless it's brought to an end.
Well, there have to be guarantees for both,
but there are,
right? There have to be guarantees.
We don't know. We don't know what the settlement's going to be.
Well,
but what Trump has done, what he's achieved, is an important first step. He's actually talking to the Russians. He's trying to get it sorted, and that is important.
It's only in his interest, Ben. The other thing is that, just to put the historical fact again, don't forget that Ukraine was promised in 2008 when it first applied to join NATO that, yes, that would still be on the table. Now we're in a position where we have, and there were reasons that they were not allowed to join NATO pre-Zelensky, and then obviously they couldn't join NATO whilst they're in conflict because that would take the whole of NATO into a war with Russia.
Russia also maintained that they have asked in the past to join NATO.
They have.
They have. That's what I've
Russia applied. Russia applied to join NATO, and we turned them down. It was the most short-sighted response from the West.
That must have been a mistake.
Well, maybe it was. Maybe it was.
Well, you have to look at the past to learn the lessons from history.
Yeah.
Where this goes, I just, for one, feel a little more, much more optimistic with Donald Trump talking. He doesn't always get his words right. Some of it is, I agree with you. Some of it is clumsy, some of it is distasteful.
It is distasteful.
Some of it is disrespectful.
It's disrespectful to all the people who've died.
And of course, Zelensky is not a dictator. I don't, subscribe to that.
It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant whether he's a dictator.
It's irrelevant to intelligent people, Ben, but it's not to the people who are sitting...
What Trump is doing, I'll tell you what I think Trump is doing, and he's actually very clever at this. What he's done is reset the centre of gravity for the debate. The debate was as you described it. Putin evil, Zelensky hero, this war must go on forever. Trump has ripped that up.
Putin's imperialistic
and Trump has reset the centre of gravity of that. It's like when he said Gaza needs to become an American Riviera. Everyone misinterpreted that. In my book, the reason he said that was a threat to the Egyptians, to Saudi Arabia and other neighbouring Arab nations. Can I just finish? It was a threat to the other Arab nations that if you don't get your act together, you're going to find an American base at your doorstep.
Well, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, was out there trying to flog real estate a year and a half ago.
What, flog Gaza?
Yeah.
I don't believe that.
He was.
There are no property rights in Gaza.
No, there are no property rights for the Palestinian people because the settlers are moving in and we do nothing about that either.
No settlers are moving into Gaza.
We all need a drink. Luckily, it's Friday night. The Dewberry Tavern is going to be open. Or maybe it's the Turner Tavern tonight.
Turner Tavern.
The Turner Tavern, there we go. Bev's Bar is going to be open. I'm going to be pulling some pints and we're going to talk about the creative industries and whether Rachel Reeves is prioritising arts and movies over, I don't know, farmers. Don't go anywhere.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Looking ahead to the weekend, and Saturday's going to be the driest, brightest day for many before some heavy rain and strong winds arrive on Sunday. But before all this, well, we have had a couple of frontal systems push through today. Most of the rain associated with that is now clearing away, but in the southeast, a frontal wave means we're going to see more heavy, at times persistent rain as we go through overnight and into tomorrow. Elsewhere, it's a drier story. Some showers though towards the northwest of the UK. Some clear skies here, elsewhere quite cloudy at times, and with that temperatures not dropping a huge amount, perhaps a little bit lower than some recent nights, but most places holding up in mid to high single figures. So not an especially chilly start to the day tomorrow, but it is going to be quite a wet one, particularly across parts of East Anglia and Kent. Otherwise largely dry across much of England and Wales, though fairly cloudy. A greater chance of some sunshine early on across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland, but western areas will have a scattering of showers, and some of these could be a little bit on the heavy side, particularly as we go into the afternoon. I am expecting a few more showers to develop. Now, through much of the morning across England and Wales, away from the southeast, it is going to be generally dry, but a few more showers across parts of Wales, southwest England are likely to pep up as we go into the afternoon, and there's a good chance that some of these could be quite heavy and spread a bit further eastwards, whilst the rain in the southeast clears away. Temperatures down a degree or so compared to today, but with some brighter skies, lighter winds, if anything, it'll feel a bit more pleasant. Not so pleasant on Sunday. We have some heavy rain and strong winds pushing in from the west. Rainfall totals could really build up, particularly across parts of South Wales. Do stay up to date with our warnings, as there's a chance that we may need to escalate them in some places. And we have strong winds with coastal gales, perhaps gusts in excess of 60 to 70 miles per hour for some. So a really unsettled day ahead. Bye-bye.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, It happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Thank you for all your messages this evening. Now, cheers. Joe Phillips and Ben Habib are here. The Dewberry Tavern is open.
Cheers.
Bar, Turner Tavern, whatever we're calling it. Now, Rachel Reeves has announced a 40% reduction in business rates bills for film studios. She was visiting Warner Brothers Studios when she told us. And we've still had, of course, no signs of support for farmers. They're continuing to protest against Labour's inheritance tax raid. Joe, what does it tell us about this government that they are excited about helping movies be made, which are, let's face it, a luxury item, and not remotely bothered about making sure we've got homegrown food on our plates for decades,
two things,
generations?
And the two shouldn't be mutually exclusive. I come from a farming family. My sister and brother-in-law are farmers. My dad was a farmer. And I feel very strongly that the government has got it wrong by not listening. And I completely get that they want to, get money from the people who bought land to avoid paying tax. But they're hitting the wrong people, and all they need to do is to raise threshold. That's stupid. It's that lack of listening that is so silly. However, the creative industries are incredibly important to this country. I will support and be pleased to anything that supports creative industries. They provide a whole load of jobs. It's not just being on front of the cameras, it's everything else. And I think what's really hard, I used to work for a charity called New Deal of the Mind, which was to help young people get into the creative industries, because it is still the case that unless you've got the connections or you've got the funding, your only way in is to work for nothing or for very little.
They're not really doing anything to help that, though, are they? By helping the people at the top of the movie industry?
Well, if you're cutting business rates,
you think they'll employ more people?
They should be able to. But the other thing, of course, is in the meantime, we know perfectly well that small businesses like hairdressers, pubs, hospitality and shops...
I'm
movies
glad...
or mook house?
I'm glad they're cutting business rates. They should cut business rates for pubs, for shops, for everyone else. But they should... but the thing about the farmers is that the Labour Party, like they have an ideological... they're wed to the ideological mass immigration policy. They're wed to destroying small farmers because they see them as the toffs, as the privileged, and they see the countryside as racist. It's not where their constituency lives. Their constituencies live in the cities and suburbs, and they're targeting the farmers. And let me just tell you what's really evil about it. Apart from losing food, this is an assault on Western capitalist ownership rights.
There are lots of Labour MPs who have now got rural constituencies.
Socialist, communist governments throughout history created the arts, encouraged the arts, and then censor everything. So that's what we've got to look forward to. Joe, Ben, thank you so much. I'll be on Britain's Newsroom Monday morning at 9:30. Lee Anderson's here. Have a great weekend. Cheers.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Looking ahead to the weekend, and Saturday's going to be the driest, brightest day for many before some heavy rain and strong winds arrive on Sunday. But before all this, well, we have had a couple of frontal systems push through today. Most of the rain associated with that is now clearing away, but in the southeast, a frontal wave means we're going to see more heavy, at times persistent rain as we go through overnight and into tomorrow. Elsewhere, it's a drier story. Some showers though towards the northwest of the UK. Some clear skies here, elsewhere quite cloudy at times, and with that temperatures not dropping a huge amount, perhaps a little bit lower than some